The first thing that ought to be asked is, when you're asking or speaking to an atheist, say you're an atheist, the question is, what is your truth standard? I mean, that's an important thing to establish. The atheist is an atheist because he's not satisfied, for the most part, with the evidences of theism, right? So he becomes an atheist. And for the most part, most atheists are negative atheists. So they are atheists because of a lack of belief of something, not because they have a positive argument against the existence of God. So for the most part, you could say that most atheists are negative atheists. Some of them are agnostic, so they wouldn't necessarily say 100% there's nothing, out there, but they just say that we are not satisfied completely with the evidences. So the first thing has to be asked is, what kind of evidences would you be satisfied with? And just thinking mentally, I came with 3 possible things which atheists could not deny, right? Number 1 is incorrigibility, which means something which is not changing, yeah? So if something is not changing, it becomes a good evidence. Number 2 is eternality, which is linked to incorrigibility. And number 3, you could say, necessarily true. So for example, it's contingently true that I'm wearing a grey jumper, yeah? But it's not necessarily true that I'm wearing a grey jumper. I'm going to try and not use too much philosophical jargon, but with those 3 kinds of evidences, an atheist would be completely satisfied. Now, an atheist might say that these kinds of things are satisfied in both maths and science. That mathematics is incorrigible. Number 2, that it's eternal. Number 3, that it's necessarily true. And the atheist might say that science is quite similar in that regard. And that's why their truth standard would be a mathematical truth standard, or it could be a scientific truth standard. They would consider these things to be truth, for the most part. Obviously, I'm not generalizing all atheists. There are postmodernists out there which don't believe in this. They criticize both mathematics and science massively. But generally speaking, I mean, from my experience, it's been the case that atheists are satisfied with these kinds of truth standards. Now the question is this. The question is mathematics, as an example here, actually those 3 things that we've just mentioned? Now this is something which has plagued the minds of philosophers ever since the time of Plato. Plato himself didn't know how to reason with numbers. Basic arithmetic, he didn't know, because if you think about it, numbers in and of themselves don't exist. You can't touch a number, you can't feel a number, you can't smell a number. Numbers is actually a conceptual, abstract reality. But in logic, you have to have a truth. In order for a truth to be true, it has to have a physical reality. Objective truth is that which is usually an object. So this poses a problem for Plato. So he says, for example, that mathematics is something he has in the forms, the world of forms. So it's something he struggled with. Immanuel Kant came in 1790, something similar. He said that mathematics is not something we take from the world, but it's something we put onto the world. Now you'll find that even after this point, mathematics itself had a shaking up. The cat was put with the pigeon, so to speak, when Kurt Gödel came out with his 2 incompleteness theorems. And basically these 2 incompleteness theorems expose the inconsistencies in maths. It exposes these inconsistencies because, according to the theorems, he had the first theorem, for example, was similar to the liar paradox. If I come forward, or someone else who's a liar says, I'm lying, right? There's no way to prove or disprove this statement, because the liar, if he's lying, he's telling the truth, which means he's not a liar. And if he's telling the truth, then that contradicts the fact that he's saying that he's lying. Now, something similar was put in a mathematic format, and from that perspective, this is called the incompleteness theorem, mathematics was seen to be inconsistent, an inconsistent model. And by the way, the philosophy of maths, or meta-mathematic narratives, or philosophy of maths, this is a big thing. and still unresolved. To this day, it's unresolved. Yet people still do maths. Yet people still do maths. Maths have axioms which cannot be proven. They are only self-evident. They are self-evident axioms. Which means, to believe in such axioms, you have to have faith. Because there's no evidence of those axioms. There's no evidence. These things, these axioms, or theorems, are based on assumptions, not concrete evidence. Science is much more flimsy than maths, in so much as it's changed much more, and it's ever-changing. And this is something which is documented well by Thomas Kuhn in his book, Structures of Scientific Revolution. That not only does science change and scientific facts change, but the whole framework within which science operates change. And now, why am I telling you this? Because you have to understand that when the atheist is skeptical with the evidences, then you have to ask yourself, what kind of evidences are you not going to be skeptical? Because those truth standards that I've aforementioned in the beginning of this talk, if they're applied to almost any discipline, you would not have faith in anything. You would not believe in anything. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't prove anything. Therefore, the truth standard wouldn't work for the atheist. That particular truth standard couldn't and wouldn't work. Rather, if we're honest with ourselves, atheistic truth standard is a truth standard which is probabilistic. Is a truth standard which is probabilistic. We as human beings work on probability reasoning almost every single day. If something is 99% assured, we're happy. If something is 99% assured, we can say we're certain of it almost. Or we can definitely say we're certain of it. And if it all piles up in front of us as a big heap of evidence, then this assures us. This is where the arguments that are put forward by the atheist, or the lack of belief that the atheist has, I would say is unsubstantiated. Because if you use a probabilistic reasoning, okay, there is no doubt in almost anyone's mind that you will come to very many conclusions about this universe. The fact that it's fine-tuned. And when I say it's finely tuned, I'm not saying that it's aesthetically pleasing. I'm not saying that. That's not what fine-tuning means. Fine-tuning means it's fine-tuned to allow any kind of life to exist within it. This is fine-tuning. Atheists and non-atheists, Muslims, Christians, Jews, anyone who's done science agrees with this. I'm not saying there isn't any rogue opinion, but I am saying this is the normal approach to the cosmological environment around us. Martin Rees wrote a book called Just 6 Numbers. And he said that any of those 6 numbers, had they been different, the universe would not be as it is, and it would not allow human life to exist. Even Stephen Hawking, in A Brief History of Time, an atheist, an ardent atheist, he admits to the fine-tuning. The fine-tuning is something which is probabilistically indicating a design. If that is the case, then the question is, whom or what designed this universe? And from this perspective, it's quite a straightforward answer. The one or the thing that has designed this universe is that one or that thing that was able to do so. And who and what? Who or what could be able to do so? So we employ basic reasoning, and we realize that it must have been something or someone with certain characteristics. Must have had knowledge. It must have had power. It must have had the ability to change the situation. It must be one. Had it not been one, there would have been a conflict of interest between the many parties that there would be. This is God. The evidence of God is not just evidence, it's overwhelming probabilistic evidence. We don't have faith in that which is unreasonable. We have faith in that which is clear. And what I personally believe is that the atheist has to, in order to avoid this thorn in his or her side, they must employ a double standard approach. They have to. The way they live their lives is different to the way they want to conceptualize the theological and philosophical reality of God. That must happen. Other than that, the atheist must think. The atheist must dare to think.
No one created the universe. The universe self-created it.
No idea. Again,
Is it possible the universe can self-create?
we don't know.
Let's think. Logical thinking earlier, remember? Right? You said logical thinking.
No one can be certain for sure.
Wait,
That's what I'm saying.
wait.
No one can be certain.
Are you certain about that?
No.
Then what's the point of talking then?
Are you certain that someone created the world?
If no one can be certain about anything,
Look, you're not-
why do you even
question.
talk?
You're not answering my question. Are you certain that someone created the world?
Yes,
How do you know?
because the one who created told us.
Sorry?
The one who created this world has told us, informed us.
In a book that someone written?
So if it was in a cassette, it would be better, right?
No. It's the same thing, same scenario.
So what's the problem?
Why would someone almighty, the creator of everything, write a book for you to follow?
If the creator gave me guidance in audio message or a written message, do I need to have a preference? I don't understand your point.
No. I mean,
Why is this objection?
there are better methods of telling people.
Like what? For example.
I'll print my name on the sky and say, I'm here.
Wouldn't that just prove it solid though?
Sorry?
Would that be any kind of test?
Okay, brother.
Why would he test it?
Suppose now we just hear a voice from the sky.
Yes.
I'm God, I created you. Would you believe?
I'll be certain. I'll be actually uncertain because it could be anything.
So you're demanding an evidence which will not give you certainty. Is that logical thinking?
It can be.
No, is that logical thinking?
Again, it's completely different.
No, it's not completely different.
It
So again, better ways you said. Better ways, instead of revealing a guidance to prophets and messengers, you said what? One in the sky, voice in the sky, which cannot give you certainty.
I'll print my name. I'll print my name on the sky.
If you see your name printed in the sky, you'll be certain.
I'd question it, but I'd be more certain than a
Would
book.
you be certain?
I'd be more certain than...
It's not about more certainty. Would you be certain that that's it? I'm certain now God exists.
Cannot be 100% certain of anything.
Give me something that will give you 100% certainty.
There's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
No such thing. It could be an illusion, it could be anything.
Right. So you're demanding evidence which will never give you 100% certainty.
It's more certain than a book.
It's not about comparative more certainty. Can you be certain is the question. You said I can never be certain. Then why do you even demand in the first place?
That's, what kind of question is that? I mean, it's a question with
It's like ordering something you don't want to eat. I mean, I don't understand where you're coming
It's
from.
nothing like that.
You are demanding evidence which will not satisfy you.
It's more satisfying.
No,
to
not
see
more satisfying.
something
I
printed.
want you to something that will satisfy you and convince you. That's it. You say that's it. I don't want anything else.
It could be an illusion, it could be anything. God himself could come down and I could be hallucinating. Mass hallucinations happened previously.
You're giving me something that would not satisfy you. What I want from you is
Something
what
that
will
would-
satisfy you.
Nothing.
Nothing. So basically, is it worth even demanding from anyone evidence about God? Because nothing will satisfy you.
No. That would feed onto something. That would probably make me believe a bit more. But
What about belief? What will give you absolute certainty? Nothing.
there's nothing.
Right. So what's the point of even getting this, some less certain things in your life?
What kind of question is that?
No, it's a simple question.
It's not a simple question.
I
Question.
can't believe it philosophically. There's nothing to prove it. But in principle, yes, I think it's
I don't
good.
understand your question. There's nothing to prove what? The morality
I can't-
or the creator?
Creator. I can't believe, philosophically, I can't believe that a creator exists. But I think it is a better principle if we...
That's understood. So when we say you can't prove there's a creator, how did you disprove there isn't?
No, who say that is true?
Okay.
That doesn't
So the
mean-
question now is, you're in a position where you cannot prove or disprove a creator.
No.
But the fact,
And it will never change.
he still
that's
has
not
morality.
an indecisive. It will never change.
but the reality is either there is a creator or there isn't. Yeah. Right. So if there is a creator, there has to be ways of proving it.
Yeah. And they're not convincing.
And what would be a convincing way of proving it?
Well, nothing. I don't think there is a way.
You're actually closing all the avenues of knowledge,
Because if
aren't
I tell
you?
you, maybe if I hear a sound from I could be hallucinating. So there is no proof. There will never be a proof.
So what gives you that certainty there won't be any proof? How are you certain?
Because you can't prove something like this. I can't prove something invisible.
No, how are you certain?
How do you prove this?
No. This is the question we're asking. If there is a
I could tell
possibility.
you, I will believe there's a creator if something happens, like a miracle happens. But
Would you?
That could be anything. That could be hallucinating.
Exactly. So, in principle, there has to be a way of establishing the existence of a creator.
Yeah, but what
If
way?
you haven't found ways of doing that, then
But
perhaps.
you will decide the way.
No, not me.
What?
That's what we're discussing. There has to be a way of proving
Maybe
it.
I'll tell you. Maybe if an animal talks to me, I'll believe there's God. But
You see,
what does that mean?
my friend,
does it mean?
there has to be a way of proving it. If the creator exists,
I don't
there has.
know. No,
So if you
there
don't
isn't,
know,
because you can't talk about something that's invisible. You can't
Invincible.
decide- You can't decide what is
gravity,
what is convincing.
is gravity visible or invisible? Gravity. If you drop your bottle, would that go
Gravity is
up
science.
or down?
Oh, now you're talking about
No.
very-
Because you made a very interesting example.
Okay.
Invincibility.
yeah.
Gravity is not visible.
It can be proved scientifically.
Yeah. So you have to now.
Gravity, I have to admit.
No, you have to admit that
I'm not
it is not
qualified.
about invincibility.
It's good to admit.
That's the problem, right?
Visibility, I think.
Invisibility.
You agree? It is not about visibility or invisibility.
It's not.
Yeah. So the creator's existence and proving the existence of the creator is not because the creator is not visible. Because gravity is not visible, but you can prove it.
Cool. No, gravity. I can. You can ask questions about it. Oh, this glass.
It
fell
falls
down.
because
I
of
ask-
gravity.
You can ask a question, but how do you begin to ask a question about God?
If there was no God, would there be anything? If there was no gravity, would that fall? We can ask questions.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But
So
I think it's a different thing.
it's not a different thing. It's the same kind of inquiry.
Because that's
The inquiry is
that's a
about
hard evidence
the
now.
inquiry
That's
is
a
about
question
cause and
very
effect.
Specific thing. Why did the glass fall?
Because
Very, very
the effect
yeah,
of falling was due to a
How
cause.
do you ask? Why are we here? That doesn't intrinsically mean there is a creator. Or it's not the
Would
same
you not
thing.
agree?
This is a very
The reason when the line of questioning is this: why does that fall?
Yeah.
Because falling is an effect.
yes.
And we are now attributing a cause to this effect because
Yeah,
what we
there must be
see,
something.
there has to be a cause for the
Yeah,
effects.
yes.
So if, for example, you are here, there has to be a cause for your existence
Yes,
because you're an effect.
absolutely, absolutely.
If the universe exists
Of course,
or
of
began
course.
to exist,
Of course
there
it-
has to be a cause
Yeah,
for its existence.
of course, yeah,
so we
I
can
absolutely
ask
agree.
this question.
We can ask this.
Exactly.
Why
So
did we exist? Yeah.
Yeah.
You can ask it, but there is no answer.
when we attributed this
can't
falling
decide the
and said it was
answer
gravity, you see, look, we said this was due to gravity. So you actually put an answer forward. Rather than saying there is no answer why the bottle falls on the ground. You actually went along
Maybe
and
there,
put.
there will be an answer. I haven't heard it yet.
Nothing's convincing.
So that's why we need to know what will be convincing to us. I mean, interestingly, you did say if people
Evidence,
demand.
evidence is convincing. There is no
Exactly. But what level of evidence?
of anything. No, even scientists, they don't have. They
To,
don't have any.
to give you
They
an
say they
example,
don't know how
to
do
give
it.
an example, the skepticism or hyper-skepticism that we are illustrating in this particular discussion, have you had a brain scan of your own self? Right. So you haven't seen your own brain.
But
Does
I know
your
it-
brain
I know
exist?
it's that. Yeah,
What evidence do you have to suggest that your brain exists?
I don't think it's. I don't.
No, no.
I don't.
We
think
just
that
want to
these are
we just want to
possible. You're
extrapolate
just asking-
the reasonings that we
It's
use
not the same
in
thing.
terms of the level of skepticism that we use in everyday thinking. Have you been to Africa?
Well, where in Africa?
Okay, maybe you have. Have you
I've
been
been
to?
to Africa, yeah.
Okay. Have you been to
Egypt.
Indonesia?
Egypt is Africa.
Have you been to
I've been
Indonesia?
Egypt. Or you think?
No.
You mean Nigeria? Or
Have you been to Indonesia? Indonesia.
No.
Right. Does
I will.
Indonesia exist?
I don't think you're making sense.
Sorry?
Don't.
No, let's try to understand how we
trying to
built the level of confidence away from skepticism.
Yeah.
No, the reason why I'm
Don't-
using this, look, my friend,
You can do
it is simple
You can do
to.
it better than
Can
that.
you
Listen.
Can you Google Indonesia?
I'm addressing what we
Google
call
that now.
skepticism
Yeah.
and how we can be certain in affirming something. For example, when we haven't been to Indonesia,
Okay.
We can Google it. So we are trusting the people who put up pictures in Google or description in
know,
Google.
we know.
So you are relying in
Because we are
what we
human
call.
beings, of course we have to trust
Look,
each
look, look.
other.
I don't have a problem with that. So you are relying on what we call testimony.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
if we take that principle,
Testimony,
that testimony is a reliable evidence. So now I say, look, Prophet.
Yeah, that's why I think maybe Jesus exists. Yeah,
No,
Jesus
so
exists,
not
Muhammad
maybe.
existed.
Are you saying maybe or definitely Indonesia
Can you
exists?
put God in Google?
Definitely. Good. So now, if we find information that's been passed to us by testimony, there are hundreds and thousands of man of God that receive revelation from God as prophets and messengers,
not
and then
the same.
they said, look, and then we relied and trusted their testimony. So if I rely on their testimony and trust the testimony,
Yeah.
and you rely on the testimony of Google,
Testimony.
why are you
Therefore-
going to be
They're not the same.
inconsistent?
Testimony of Jesus is a different testimony from someone who went to
Yes,
Indonesia.
absolutely.
That is the point. Please stop being smart.
Say again. Explain that a bit more. Say Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes, a testimony
No,
of
he
someone
said,
who saw
who said,
Muhammad
who said,
is a different testimony
No, no.
from someone
Who said,
went to
"I
Indonesia."
have been-
Please understand this and
Sorry?
stop repeating the point.
no. Look, you cannot just simply brush the argument away underneath the carpet.
That's why
the
it's
argument,
endless,
no,
classic
the
endless
argument is
discussion. I thought it's
raised.
endless.
You have to show how the argument is invalid. I've given you an example about testimony. Like, you have not an image of your own brain. The testimony that you have is other people, their brain scan demonstrates they have a brain. But you haven't done a scan of your own brain.
think it's
So
way-
you have now made, not testimony, do you agree? You have made a generalization based on assumption. That other people, no, this is how your evidence works.
If you go to, if someone tells you that Indonesia exists, you can actually go. And,
Have you gone there?
yes.
Wait. Have you, no wait there. Excuse me, have you gone there yet?
Yes.
Has he gone there? You haven't. So that means,
But I can tell you.
you see, listen,
Been there. Yeah, but
if you haven't been there, that means, for example, have you had a scan of your pancreas? Pancreas.
They have that.
Right. Does your
has nothing
pancreas,
to do with it.
excuse
So we can continue to discuss
No.
about other topics.
Listen.
Have you studied quantum physics?
You should
little
learn.
bit, yeah.
But it has nothing to do with it.
No, the reason I'm asking is, when we want to understand and affirm the knowledge of something, that yes, I'm certain. Are you certain you have a pancreas?
Probably. Yes.
Are you certain? Right. So you're skeptical that you have a pancreas. Do you have a heart? The actual heart, physical heart. Are you certain?
Something pounding in my,
Are you
in my
are you certain
chest.
it's the heart? Have you seen it?
It's a diaphragm.
No.
Exactly. You're not certain. So you're skeptical
So
that you.
Descartes.
Wait a moment, my
Yes.
friend.
You
You're
don't think that you
skeptical.
know That's the only thing you
Please,
sure of.
you're skeptical that you have a heart or not, you have a pancreas or not. I mean, have you had a brain scan?
No,
yourself?
but everything is
Are you
logical.
skeptical?
If
I can do
just
that.
take logical arguments, I can just build myself. And
Do you see what you're doing now? Instead of bringing hard evidence, let's try to understand the level of evidence you're bringing. Your level of evidence is logical, as you said, logical evidence, assumptions through generalization, testimony. Okay, so are you absolutely certain that you have a brain? There you go. So you haven't got.
I'm not saying that I have one, so I'm not wrong so far.
Hang on. So when you're speaking to me, you really think that you haven't got a brain.
No, I just don't.
What makes you think you have a brain?
I don't say I have one. I don't say I don't have one. You just asking me if
Okay.
I think.
Okay, let me ask you. Do you have a brain?
I don't know.
You don't know.
What's your point?
So you might think that you don't have a brain or you have a brain,
I
right?
don't know. I just said I don't know. You're repeating yourself.
No. You really think you don't know, right?
Yes.
Okay. You sound an honest answer.
Yeah.
You honestly think that you don't know whether you have a brain or not.
Yes.
Really? Very interesting. So when you go, do you work or study?
I work.
Work. In your workplace, do you use your brain?
I don't know. I manage to think.
So what do you use to do all this work? And
My hands. I can
your
see
hands.
them.
Okay. And your hand operates through what? By itself.
I don't know how I use them.
You tell your employee you don't have a brain.
People say it's the brain that determines the
Do you
movements.
need to know if you have a brain to live?
No,
No,
because.
definitely. So you don't
No, no.
need to know if you have a brain to be able
But
to use it.
I'm interested
That's
in
the-
finding out if you don't know you have a brain or not. And scientists are telling us it's the brain that actually regulates our movement and so on. So you
need
think,
to believe their testimony.
do you believe that you have a
I
brain?
don't care.
Do you believe?
I can create a logical construction based on what they're saying and not assume anything in the end. Just until I get a proof that it's correct or not, I can assume that it's correct or not. But if the whole logical construction is working, I can not disprove it.
So now you're bringing this question about logical credibility. If we use logical arguments, it's possible that we can accept it as an evidence. Is that what you're saying? So if someone demonstrates to you through a logical
The
argument,
construction can be logical and validated.
validated
Doesn't mean that the
means you can accept it.
Doesn't mean that the basement is validated.
You're saying validated means it's acceptable.
Acceptable if the basement is validated.
What do you mean by basement?
The basement or
The
like
premise.
the hypothesis.
The premises.
But
Okay.
if you disprove the hypothesis, the whole construction falls down.
Yeah. So can you use a logical argument that you have a brain?
So far, no.
So far, no.
Die and look into my own
Right.
head, skull.
So all your everyday life, because you must have studied, right, in school and in university, wherever, right? And then you never once thought that I may have a brain.
I may have, but it's, as you said,
But you don't
it's
know.
only generalization.
So you don't know.
I've seen a brain in the human skull.
Sure.
I cannot prove that I have the same in my skull. I can just assume that given that it's the higher, the most likely.
Let me ask you another
feature.
very silly question. Are you certain that you exist?
This is an interesting question.
That's what I said. It's silly, but it's interesting. Are you certain you exist?
No.
You're not certain.
No, maybe as Elon Musk said, we're maybe just a big simulation.
Yeah, it could be a brain in a jar, right?
What kind of way
In
of
a
thinking
museum, it could be a brain in a jar.
Do you think you sound rational when you say these things?
No, it's not
I mean,
rational.
how can anyone take you seriously when you say these things?
You're ready to say a brain in the jar.
No.
Okay, this is not reality, but you're not ready to admit.
I mean, do you live your life like this, in oblivious? Like you don't know
not,
anything.
Not knowing.
I mean, do you feel good about this, like thinking like this? Is it a good way of thinking?
Does it give you peace and tranquility in your heart? Being that kind of hyper-skeptical, does it give you this tranquility in your heart? Who you are, what are you here, what are you doing?
It's because I can build myself on this logical assumption. So far, if you disprove ground hypothesis, I'm just asking for you ground hypothesis that makes you believe.
But you're not certain you exist or not. It could be just an illusion.
Are you certain that you exist?
So
I've been
I am
answering
certain.
all your questions.
I am
like
certain.
why?
Yeah. It's not about why. I am certain.
Okay,
So-
you were answering question for like 10 minutes now.
Yeah.
No, it's my turn. Why are you sure
Okay.
you exist?
So
you
you
won't
want to know.
answer.
So you want to know from me. Hang on. You want to know from me why I'm certain.
I think you couldn't take it.
Next,
Reality was too harsh.
who's next? Reality was too harsh. Mansur wants more. Reality was too harsh.
The level of hyper-skepticism really, you see, in the everyday life,
That's insincerity.
exactly.
He
In
knows-
the
he
everyday
knows
life,
very well.
they won't behave with that. Imagine he had a girlfriend or a wife. Would you really think that her girlfriend doesn't
Baby,
exist like
do
he
you
doesn't
really
exist?
exist? Do I exist, baby?
Okay, may Allah guide us all, you know. May Allah